Assalamualaikum to our beloved lecturer, Dr. ROSLEE bin Ahmad, my beloved group friends and my classmates, and very good day to Mr. Pradeep and Mr. Kumar. Alhamdulillah, today our group will present our title Inferential and Descriptive Statistical Analysis. We are from group 2. We are prepared for Dr. Rusli Ahmad. He is senior lecturer at counseling program. He is a registered counselor with KBPA, lecturer at Faculty of Leadership and Management, USIM. Okay, this is about our video, intro our video.
You got me wide open, now I'm yours. You found me heartbroken on the floor. Became my salvation through the war. Yeah, you got me wide open, now I'm sure. In a world like this, with some back down, I know we're gonna.
Alhamdulillah, this is our group members. I'm Asma Binti Ahmad from Ministry of Education, and then Mr. Norulhuda Bin Mat Rozei from Present Ministry, and then Mr. Mohamad Zulfikre bin Ismail from Present Ministry too. Okay, about my subtopic, I will explain about inferential statistics. How to conducting inferential analysis, identify the procedures for analyzing your data, learn how to report the results of analyzing your data, and the fifth, describe how to interpret the result. About Mr. Norulhuda, he will explain about introduction of descriptive research, correlative research, and causal comparative research, and document analysis. He was inspector at Malaysian Prison Department before further study at SPADA. And the last one, but more important too, is a subtopic about ethnography. Second, about case study and analytical method, presented by Mr. Mohamad Zulfikre bin Ismail from Deputy Superintendent of Prison Malaysia, Prison of Department Malaysia. This is about my subtopic again. Okay, first of all, I will explain about what is statistic. Statistic, a field of study concerned with, okay, point 1 is the collection, organization, summarizing, and analysis of data. The second point is drawing of inference about a body of data when only part of the data is observed. The next about point statistic is statistic, the science of collecting, organizing, presenting, analyzing, and interpreting data to assist in making more effective decision. Okay, statistics are tools. Statistic is a technique for organizing, summarizing, and interpreting data. Which tool you choose depends on what you want to know, what type of data you have, what kind of research design you use. Okay, statistics and research. Statistics are used to analyze the data collected in a research study. For example, suppose research participant taste both Diet Coke and Diet Pepsi and indicate which one they prefer. 37 prefer Diet Coke, 32 prefer Diet Pepsi. So we have observed a difference, but it is different meaningful. Using statistics, we can determine if there is a meaningful difference between the number of people who prefer each other soda. Okay, statistic divide to two parts. First is about a descriptive statistic. Second about inferential statistic. Okay, what's a descriptive statistic? Descriptive statistic is presenting organization and summarizing data. Second method of organizing, summarizing, and presenting data in informative way. Okay, next inferential statistic. Inferential statistic is a drawing conclusion about population based on data observed in a sample. The method of inferential statistic used to find out something about a population based on a sample. Okay. More about statistic about descriptive. Descriptive statistic is collecting, analyzing, summarize, and presenting data. Inferential statistic is making inference, hypothesis testing. A third, determining relationship. For making predictions. Okay, my part is I will explain about inferential statistical. First, inferential statistical involve using obtain sample statistic to estimate the corresponding population parameters. Second, most common inference is using a sample mean to estimate a population mean surveys, opinion polls, and others. Okay, now I will explain about understanding inferential statistics, an overview of important concept. The first one is the complete set of individuals or objective that the investigator is interested in studying. They are focused to population. Okay, the second concept is a sample. Sample is a subset of the population that is actually being studied. Okay, the third one is variable, a characteristic of an individual or object that can have different values as opposed to a constant. The number 4 is the variable that is systematically manipulated or measured by the investigator to determine its impact on the outcome. This is a based or independent variable. Okay, the number 5 is dependent variable, the outcome variable of interest. Number 6 is data, the measurement that are collected by the investigator. Okay, the number 7 is statistic. It's about summary measure of a sample. The number 8 is parameter, summary measure of a population. Okay, next. Inferential statistic consists of generation from sample to population, performing estimation and hypothesis test, determining relationship among variables and making prediction. Okay, description here is about to describe the change of an event occurring. Final result will be in the form of probability. For example, predicting effectiveness of a drug, predicting the relationship between deaths and smoking habit. Okay, next. There are two ways of using inferential statistics. First one is hypothesis testing. What is hypothesis testing? Hypothesis testing is answering the question of whether or not treatment X may have no effect on outcome Y. Okay. The number two ways. Okay. The number two is about point estimation. What is point estimation? That is determining what the likely effect of treatment X is on outcome Y. Okay, next, conducting hypothesis test. Okay, first, identify a null and alternative hypothesis. Second, collect the data. Third, make a decision about rejecting, failing to reject. Number 4, set the level of significance, alpha level, for rejecting the null hypothesis. The 5th, compute the sample. Okay, I will okay, this is a video about selecting and appropriate statistic.
We will now walk through the 5 steps to do hypothesis testing. And let me quickly add, there's nothing magical about the number 5. I happen to break this procedure into 5 steps. But I've seen other authors use 6 or 7, sometimes 4. The important thing for you to know as a statistics student is that we are all teaching you the same procedure. This is like cutting a pie into 6 or 8 slices. You're still going to get the whole pie. I just happen to cut mine into 5. These 5 steps are outlined in a document that I call the bear handout. The little white bear in the bear handout will introduce you to the steps and give you lots of useful information about techniques. Sometimes he hangs out with a raccoon, this time it's a squirrel. They're all stuffed animals. So let's get started. Step number 1, select the appropriate statistic. Now this is both the easiest and the most difficult step. As you are learning statistics, this will be the easiest step, because when it comes time to choose the appropriate statistic, the answer will be whatever test we're learning this week. So if we're learning about single sample t-tests, the answer to step 1 will be single sample t-tests. However, in the real world, no one is going to tell you what test to use, and you need to know how to read your data and determine the appropriate test to analyze it. So we begin with this step because it forces us to really look at our data and think about how we're going to proceed. We need to determine which test to use based upon whether our research question is looking for differences between groups or relationships between variables. We need to consider the level of our data, nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. We need to consider whether our data are approximately normally distributed or not. Do our samples have approximately equal standard deviations? Have the assumptions for the test we plan to use been violated? All of these are questions that we must answer before we can decide what test to use. And we call this process exploratory data analysis. You will use the diagrams in the bear handout to select which statistical test to use. You'll choose the test based on whether you're looking for differences between groups or relationships within groups. For differences, you'll use t-tests or an ANOVA. For relationships, you would use correlation and regression. You'll consider the level of the data. Nominal data will be analyzed with a chi-square. Ordinal data or highly skewed scale-level data might require a non-parametric test. Exploratory data analysis will help you decide what test to choose. However, since we're still learning, I will provide you with with clean data sets, most of the time. Notice that the names of the tests are color-coded to match the levels of data, nominal, ordinal, and scale. So for our baby weight example, we will be comparing the Siberian sample mean to the world population mean. And this would be the setup for a single sample t-test. We will now walk through the 5 steps to do hypothesis testing. And let me quickly add, there's nothing magical about the number 5. I happen to break this procedure into 5 steps. But I've seen other authors use 6 or 7, sometimes 4. The important thing for you to know as a statistics student is that we are all teaching you the same procedure. This is like cutting a pie into 6 or 8 slices. You're still going to get the whole pie. I just happen to cut mine into 5. These 5 steps are outlined in a document that I call the bear handout. The little white bear in the bear handout will introduce you to the steps and give you lots of useful information about techniques. Sometimes he hangs out with a raccoon, this time it's a squirrel. They're all stuffed animals. So let's get started. Step number 1, select the appropriate statistic. Now this is both the easiest and the most difficult step. As you are learning statistics, this will be the easiest step, because when it comes time to choose the appropriate statistic, the answer will be whatever test we're learning this week. So if we're learning about single sample t-tests, the answer to step 1 will be single sample t-tests. However, in the real world, no one is going to tell you what test to use, and you need to know how to read your data and determine the appropriate test to analyze it. So we begin with this step because it forces us to really look at our data and think about how we're going to proceed. We need to determine which test to use based upon whether our research question is looking for differences between groups or relationships between variables. We need to consider the level of our data, nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. We need to consider whether our data are approximately normally distributed or not. Do our samples have approximately equal standard deviations? Have the assumptions for the test we plan to use been violated? All of these are questions that we must answer before we can decide what test to use. And we call this process exploratory data analysis. You will use the diagrams in the bear handout to select which statistical test to use. You'll choose the test based on whether you're looking for differences between groups or relationships within groups. For differences, you'll use t-tests or an ANOVA. For relationships, you would use correlation and regression. You'll consider the level of the data. Nominal data will be analyzed with a chi-square. Ordinal data or highly skewed scale level data might require a non-parametric test. Exploratory data analysis will help you decide what test to choose. However, since we're still learning, I will provide you with clean data sets, most of the time. Notice that the names of the tests are color-coded to match the levels of data, nominal, ordinal, and scale. So for our baby weight example, we will be comparing the Siberian sample mean to the world population mean. And this would be the setup for a single sample t-test.
Next, example of inferential statistic. TV networks monitor the popularity of their program by hiring nations and other organizations to sample the preference of TV viewers. The accounting department of a large firm will select a sample of the invoice to check for accuracy for all the invoices of the company. Third, pre-election polling techniques used to predict election result based on our sample of 10,000 drivers across the US. We estimate that between 34% to 40% of all US drivers are driving on undeveloped trials. Okay. Now I will explain about population and parameters. Suppose a statistician want to know average GPA all student etc. Okay. Second, for example, a gross sale at Ramly Burger stores this year in Selangor. Average customer satisfaction rating for all. Third one, the third example, target stores in Selangor. Okay. The second is about population. Is all elements can be people or things. Elements can be people or things whose characteristics are being studied. Also called the target population. Okay. A value such as average, total, and so on that is calculated from the population is called a parameter. Okay. Population. Largest collection of integers or values of a random variable for which we have an interest at a particular time, such as weights of infants, babies kan, weights of adults. Okay. Finite, the second example, a finite population, fixed numbers of values, such as adult population in a village. Okay, next, infinite population. This is endless structures of values, such as OPD, patient in a hospital. So, sample is a part of a population. This one, sample, a part of population. Subset. Okay. Next is about sample and statistic. For example, recall that the statistic wants to know the average customer satisfaction rating for all at target stores in Giant Kanga. So, a survey is given to every 10 customer at 5 randomly selects target stores in Giant Kanga during a 3-day period. Okay, a sample is a subset of the population that is selects for study. A value that is calculated from a sample is called a statistic. Okay, this one is about selecting an appropriate statistic. Okay, the goals such as describe one group, type of data measurement from population, mean, SD. Compare one group to hypothetical value, one sample t-test. Compare to unpaired group, unpaired t-test. Compare to paired group, paired t-test. And compare 3 or more unmatched groups, one way ANOVA. Okay, the second table, rank, score or measurement from non-Gaussian population. Okay, first describe one group, median, interquartile range. Okay, compare one group to a hypothetical value, Wilcoxon test. Compare to unpaired group, Mann-Whitney test. Compare to paired group, Wilcoxon's test. Compare 3 or more unmatched group, Kruskal-Walsh test. Okay, goal for the third binomial, 2 possible outcomes. Okay, describe one group, proportion. Compare one group to a hypothetical value, chi-square or binomial test. Okay, compare to unpaired group, Fisher's test. For example lah, compare to paired group, McNemar's test. Compare 3 or more unmatched group, chi-square test. Okay, goal survival time, describe one group, Kaplan-Meier survival curve. Okay, next, compare to unpaired group, log rank test or mental hazard. Compare to paired group, conditional, proportional hazard ratio. Compare 3 or more unmatched group, Cox proportional hazards regression. Okay, this is a example ke normal curve. This is mean standard deviation. Next, this is the normal curve of mean differences of all possible outcome if the null hypothesis is true. Okay, look at reject the null hypothesis. Okay, high probability value if the null hypothesis is true. Okay, reject the null hypothesis. And this one, extremely low probability values if null hypothesis is true, critical region. Okay, this one is extremely low probability values if null hypothesis is true, critical region. Okay, alpha 0.0 to 5, alpha, this one, okay, two-tail test. Okay, this one, for example. Okay, state of affairs in the population. Decision made by the researcher based on the statistical test value. Okay, they look reject the null hypothesis. They look fail to reject the null hypothesis. Not effect, null true. Effect exists, null false. Okay, effect exists, null false is correctly rejects, no error. Probability power. Okay. Type 2 error, false negative. Probability beta. Okay. Look at to the reject null hypothesis, no effects, no true. Type 1 error, false positive. Probability alpha. Okay, look at fail to reject the null hypothesis, no effect, no true. Correctly not reject, no error. Okay. Outcomes of hypothesis testing, type 1 and type 2. Okay, next is about reporting the result. Table summarize statistical information. Title each table, present one table for each statistical test, organize data into rows and columns with simple and clear headings. Report not that qualify, explain or provide additional information in the table which can be helpful to readers. Notes include information about the size of the sample report in the study, the probability values used in hypothesis testing, and the actual significant levels of the statistical test. Okay, next. Reporting the result again is about figures such as charts, pictures, drawings, portrait variable and their relationships. Okay, label with a clear title that include the number of the figure. Second one, the argument rather than duplicate the text. The third one, convey only essential facts. 4. Omit visually distracting detail. 5. Easy to read and understand. 6. Consistent with and are prepared in the same style, has similar figures in the same article. Okay. The last one is carefully planned and prepared. Carefully planned and prepared are the figures lah. Okay. The next about reporting the result again. Detailed explanation about statistical result. Okay, report whether the hypothesis test was significant or not provide important information about the statistical test given the statistics. The third, include language typically used in reporting statistical results. Okay. For discussing the result, first one must summarize major result. Okay. The second one is explain why they accurate. The third, explain the implication of the result for the audience. Okay. The fourth is advanced limitation. The fifth is suggest future research. The sixth is end on positive notes. Okay, this is all about my part. I will finish here. I will finish my presentation here. So I will. I hope my friend will continue my presentation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Cikgu Asma, for our first presenter today. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good morning to Honorable Lecturer Dr. ROSLEE bin Ahmad, my teammate, and all fellow friends. My title for presentation today is Descriptive Statistical Analysis. I'm Norulhuda Bin Mat Rozei, metric number 2201353. This is the content for my presentation today. This is introduction, meaning of descriptive research. The number 3, correlational research. And 4, causal comparative research. 5, document analysis. 6, ethnography represented by Mr. Zulfikre. Number 7, case study also he will present, and then the number 8, analytical method. This is the number 1 is a nature of descriptive research. This is meaning attempt to describe, explain, and interpret conditions of the present example. What is the purpose is to examine phenomenon that is occurring at a specific place and time. Descriptive research is concerned with conditions, practices, structure difference, or relationship and that exist, opinion held processes that are going on for the process that are going to or trend that are evidence. This is correlational. The number 1 is correlational research. This is involve collecting data to determine whether and to what degree a relationship exists between 2 or more quantitative variables. And this is the characteristic sample size, at least 30 participants. Outcome of the study allows the researchers to describe whether and to what degree 2 or more variables are related. One group of subjects measures and 2 variables. Variables must be quantitative and usually represent at least ordinal scales of measure. Cannot be used to determine causality. A consistent relationship can be used to predict which future event. This is positive correlation. This is positive correlation means that as variables A increase, so does variable B. And this means is high with high and low with low. And number 2 is a negative correlation. That means a negative correlation when variable A increase, variable B will decrease. This contra from the positive correlation. This is a correlational coefficient defined as a numerical representation of strength and direction of relationship. The correlation coefficient of a -1 indicates a weak or negative relationship. A positive one indicates a strong or positive relationship. 0 indicates no relationship at all. This is the step of correlational research. The first one is selecting a problem, choosing a sample, at least 30, selecting or developing instruments such as tests, questionnaires, observations, and then collecting and analyzing data, and then interpreting results. This is examples, the relationship between high IQ and high CGPA, the relationship between low economical conditions and domestic violence. Number 2, relationship between stock exchange and political situation of country. And then the type of correlational research. This is relationship studies. This attempt to gain insight in variables that are related to complex variables such as academic performance, self-concept, stress, achievement, motivation, or creativity. The number 2 is prediction studies. These are conducted to facilitate decision about individual or to aid in various type of selection. They are conducted determine predictive validity of measuring tools as well as the test variables hypothesis to be predictors of criterion variables. This is number 2, correlational research. This is named causal comparative research. This is a research that seeks to find a relationship between independent and dependent variables after an action or event has already occurred. The researcher's goal is to determine whether the independent variable affect the outcome or dependent variable by comparing two or more group or individuals. There are similarities and difference between causal comparative research, also referred to as post-factor research. This is from Latin, after the defect. This is the Latin language, and both correlational and experimental research. And then there are 3 main purposes of causal comparative research, such as exploration. The number 2 is exploration of effect, exploration of causes, and exploration of consequence. This is the type of causal comparative research. These are the 2 types. Number 1 is retrospective causal comparative research. This requires that a researcher begin investigating a particular question when the effect have already occurred, and the researcher attempt to determine whether one variable may have influenced another variables. The number 2 is prospective causal comparative research. This researchers using this type of method begin by studying the causes and then investigating the possible effect. This is the way to conducting a causal comparative study. Number 1 is design and procedure. The researchers select 2 groups of participants, the experimental and the control group, but more accurately referred to as comparison groups. Groups may differ in 2 ways. One group possesses a characteristic that the other does not. Each group has characteristics but to differing degrees or amount. Definition and selection of the comparison group are very important part of a causal comparative procedure. The independent variable differentiating the groups must be cleared and operationally defined since each group represents a different population. A causal comparative research, the random sample is selected from two already existing population, not from a single population as in experimental research. As in experimental studies, the goal is to have groups that are as similar as possible on all relevant variables except the independent variables. And lastly, the more similar the two groups are on such variables, the more homogeneous they are on everything but the independent variable. Number two is a control procedures. This is the lack of randomizations, manipulations, and control. All the source and weakness in a causal comparative study. Random assignment is probably the best single best way to try to ensure equality of the groups. A problem is the possibility that the group are different on some other important variables, example gender, experience, or age. Besides the identified independent variables. The number three is matching. Matching is another control technique. If a researcher has identified a variable likely to influence performance on the dependent variable, the researcher may control for that variable by pairwise matching of participants. For each participant in one group, the researcher finds a participant in the other group with the same or very similar score and the control variable. If a participant in either group does not have a suitable match, the participant is eliminated from the study. The resulting measure groups are identical or very similar with respect to identify extraneous variable, and then the problem becomes serious when the researcher attempt to simultaneously measure participants on two or more variables. Number four is comparing homogeneous groups or subgroups. Number one is to control extraneous variables. Compare groups that are homogeneous with respect to the extraneous variable. This procedure may lower the number of participants and limits the generalizability of findings. A similar but a more satisfactory approach is to form subgroups within each group that represent all levels of control variables. Each group might be divided into high, average, and low IQ subgroups. The existence of comparable subgroups is in each group control for IQ. In addition, the controlling for the variable, this approach also permits the researcher to determine whether the independent variable affect the dependent variable differently at a different level of the control variable. The best approach is to build the control variable right into the research and analyze the results and statistical technique called factorial analysis of variance. A factorial analysis allows the researcher to determine the effect of the independent variable and the control variable on the dependent variable both separately and in combination. And lastly, it permits determination of whether there is interaction between the independent variable and the control variable such that independent variable operates differently at different levels of the control variables. This is the value or the advantage of causal comparative research. In the large majority of education research, especially in the fields of sociology or psychology of education, it is not possible to manipulate independent variables due to ethical consideration, especially when one is dealing with variables such as anxiety, intelligence, home environment, teacher personality, and the negative reinforcement. And then it is not possible to control such variables as in an experimental research. For studying such topics and their influence on students, causal comparative method is the most appropriate. This is the weaknesses of causal comparative research. There are three major limitations of causal comparative research. Number one is a lack of control or inability to manipulate independent variables methodologically. Number two, the lack of power to assign subjects randomly to groups. Number three, high risk inappropriate interpretation. The lack of randomization, manipulation, and control factor make it difficult to establish cause and effect relationship with any degree of confidence. This is a correlation versus causation example. I want to share the scenario. My mother-in-law recently complained to me whenever I try to text message, my phone freeze. I quick look at the smartphone, confirm my suspicion. She had 5 gamer apps on the same time plus Facebook and YouTube. I act of trying to send message causing freeze. The lack of RAM was, but she immediately connect it the last action was doing before freeze. She was implying a causation where there was only a correlation. Number three is document analysis. It is closely related to heuristical research since surveys we study to existing documents. The method of document analysis enables the researcher to include a large amount of textual information and systematically identify its properties. It is widely used research tool aimed to determining the presence of a certain word or concept within the text or set of text. It could be defined as a research technique for the objective, systematic, and quantitative description of manifest content of communication. This is a technique for making inference by objectively and systematically identifying specific characteristics of a message. This is a wide analysis document. Documents are essential elements of work in education include student essay, exam papers, minutes of meetings, module outline, and policy document. In some pedagogic research, analysis of document will inform the investigation. If you used to triangulate or give another perspective on a research question, result of a document analysis may complement other data. For example, policy documents in an institution may be analyzed and interviews with staff or student, and observation of classes may suggest whether or not new policies are being implemented. Asset data from documents, interviews, and observation could contribute to a case study. Lastly, this is advantages and disadvantages. Robson 2002 state that the advantages and disadvantages of content analysis. An advantage is that documents are unobtrusive and can be used without imposing on participants. It can be checked or rechecked for reliability. A major problem is that documents may not have been written for the same purpose as the research, and therefore conclusion will not usually be possible from document analysis alone. That's all from me. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, all fellow friends. To continue our presentation today, I would like to invite our third presenter, Mr. Zulfikre. Thank you.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, my friend, for passing this presentation for me. Okay, I will continue my part for this presentation, and I will cover three subtopic. The first is I will explain more deeply about the ethnography, and the second is the case study, and third is analytical method. Okay, we go the first of subtopic is what is ethnography. Okay, ethnography, a study that explain a culture, understand the way of life of culture from the point of view of culture being researched. Walcott 1984 and 1999 stated that a field of science that explains culture and essential, uh, a process that tries to explain and translate social expression between different group of people. The word of ethnography is come from the Greek word that the ethnos meaning of human and race of culture. It is a type of observational field study that is often used in sociological and anthropological studies. According to the Savita American 2005, ethnography as a written explanation of a culture about custom, belief, behavior based on information gathered from fieldwork. From the fieldwork. It is a descriptive study of culture, a subculture, institution, or group of study. According to the Creswell 2005, also that stated that ethnography is a form of a qualitative study to describe and analyze and interpret the form of culture sharing of a group such as behavior, also belief, language, economy, political structure, interaction, life, and style in relationship. To understand the culture sharing, a researcher needs to spend time in the field to join the interview and monitor and document to understand it. It takes a long time so the data can be recorded in detail. In short, ethnography is the depiction and study of human culture on a small scale that interact with each other. Okay, we go for the next slide. Okay, for this slide is talk about the assumption in an ethnographic research. This is according to the Garson. These are as follow. Okay, the first is ethnography. Assume that the principal research interest is primarily affected by community cultural understanding. Okay, for the information, data analysis process is involved explicit interpretation of the meaning and function of human action. Interpretation happen within the context or group and are presented in the description of theme. Okay, the second is ethnography assume an ability to identify the relevant community of interest. Okay, in some setting, this can be difficult. Community, formal organization, informal group, and individual level perception may all play a causal role in the subject under the study, and the importance of this may be vary by time, place, and issue. Okay, the third is ethnography assume that the researcher is capable of understanding and cultures more of the population under study. Okay, and it also has mastered and the language or technical jargon of the culture and has been finding on comprehensive knowledge of the culture. And the fourth is, while not inherent to the method, cross-cultural ethnographic research runs the risk of falsely assume that a given measure have the same meaning across a culture. Ethnography in general is a method of field observation. This technique is usually related to the discipline of anthropology. In this technique, data and information are obtained with reference to study of understand and observation of culture and subculture. The researcher will be equally involved in community study and will interact with them. For example, the study of practice of worship by an ethnic group in a settlement area. Study made by researcher or researchers by researchers usually revolve around understanding and culture of the community and distinguishing the characteristic of the culture and seeing the similarity with other cultures. This is danger that the researcher may introduce a bias toward perspective of his or her own culture. Okay, this is about the characteristic of ethnographic research. Okay, first, the characteristic is the people's behavior is studied in everyday context. Second, it is conducted in the natural setting, and its goal is more likely to be exploratory rather than evaluative. And it is aimed at discovering the local presence or native point of view. The native may be a consumer or an user. Data gathered from a wide range of sources, but observation and or relatively informal conversation are usually the principal ones. It is simply means that initially the data are collected as raw form and wide amount as feasible. The focus of ethnography is on understanding of human behavior in a small group, involving researcher and respondent in the study. Study involve a natural environment or at the study site. It means that the variables studied are in the natural environment and environment that is not controlled by the researcher. The study involved face-to-face interaction of the researcher and the respondent, such as observation and interview by a researcher, asking a question very clearly. Okay, we move to the next slide. Okay, it's also continue about the characteristic of ethnography research. Uh, okay, the focus is usually a single setting or group of relatively small size. Uh, the analysis of the data involves interpretation of the meaning and function of human action and mainly take the form of verbal description and explanation. Next is about the it is cyclic in nature concerning data collection and analysis. It is open to change and refinement throughout the process as new learning shape future observation. Ethnography is considered as a qualitative research method, and its goal of qualitative research is to gain the depth of knowledge of a subject. For instance, an ethnographer will collect information about the daily experience, including ritual, celebration, and social interaction of a group of people. The researcher focus on the small group, and the collection of the data is usually informal. Ethnography research rarely use statistical data analysis, but more often relies on the interpretation of data and involving reviewing the verbal description and explanation of what was observed. Okay. Okay, next, we focus about the technique used in conducting ethnography. This is very important for us. Okay, first, the technique is using by observing behavior, and it is making note and mapping pattern of behavior, sketching of relationship between people, taking photographer, video recording, and daily life and activities, and using the digital technology and web camera. Second, we use of the listening to conversation and interviewing. The researcher need to make note or audio record this. Okay, the ethnographer's eyes and ear are two very important tools for collecting information, but the communication is almost the key. Any instrument that can record, store, and sort information is of primary use to the ethnographer. Okay, tape recorder, camera, and notepad are some of the most commonly used tools for ethnographic research. Recording interview about the ethnographer will be recorded. In order to be successful ethnographologist, you have to able to correctly conduct an ethnography step. Okay. Okay, next we focus about the step of conducting ethnography. First, the identify research method. Okay, this step determine what the problem you are seeking to be better understand. Develop a problem statement or raise question you seek to know more about. The problem or question may be about nearly any topic that address people in designated environment. You may be wishing to better understand things like culture, relationship, and interaction process, or anything else that affect how people think and behave. Okay, step 2 is determine location for research. Okay, identify the best place to conduct the participatory research. You may choose more than one location if the research question or problem warrant it. Select a location that will provide the best opportunity to observe, to participate and take field note and understand how the people in the environment act, communicate, and think. Okay. Third is about the formulate presentation method. Okay, the step 3 is formulate presentation method. Okay, it is considered the most effective ways to obtain objective information. Will you be adopting a role of a person in the community or organization you are observed? Will you be covered will other know you are conducting research? Recognize that if others know you are a researcher, they may act and respond differently if they don't know. On the other hand, consider the most ethical way to observe and collect data. Okay, the fourth step is acquire permission and access. Okay, this is because ethnographic research can be a bit intrusive. It's usually necessary to obtain permission for access into the location that you have planned to research. Always obtain permission in writing. Let decision maker know what your observational method will be, how you plan to participate, how the information you collect will be used, and so forth. Being ethical and considerate is critically important. Okay. The step 5 is observe and participate. Okay, the ethnography require more than just observation. To research effectively, you will want to participate in the organization you are researching in some capacity. Determine the type of thing you are looking for in regard to your question and problem, and determine the most effective ways to collect note. Be as objective as possible when we observing and participating. Writing running description. This you remember impression and feeling, idea that come to mind, and so forth. Okay. Next is about the collect the achievable data. Okay, collect the achievable data is about the you may you may to increase your understanding of behavior and action. Interview may be necessary. You may do this interview immediately after witnessing something, and the end of designated observation period, and the end of the day or event, that the end of entire research period. Determine who is best to interview and what questions are critical to helping you to understand your research question. Okay, last is the code and analyze the data. Okay, many organizations, community, and culture have other artifacts and information that you can use to assist your data collection. Review things like paper, email, and physical artifact, phone conversation, marketing, cultural, website, and other information resource to enhance your understanding of the environment. Okay, the code of analyzed data is also is the way that make the most sense for your observation. Consider the following method for analyzing and summarizing data: code and label the you saw and heard, sort for pattern, identify outlier, compare with theory, and take note of reflective remarks. Okay, okay, this is we focus about the they have advantage and disadvantage. First, we focus about the advantage of ethnography. Okay, we can see that it is also appropriate to behavior that are best understood by observing them within their natural environment dynamic. Second is it is provide the researcher with a much more comprehensive perspective than other form of research. Okay, one advantage of ethnography research is that it provides insight into aspects of social life, including the perception and value, which other research methods are unable to capture. Ethnography can eliminate that which is taken for granted and which goes unspoken within a community. Okay, another key strength of ethnographic method is that they allow us to discover, witness, and explore the complexity and detail of consumer ritual and routine. Assessing ritual and routine is crucial. It allows us to understand and human moment and punctuate the ritual of everyday life. Okay. Okay, this of disadvantage of ethnography. Okay, first, there is no way to check the validity of the researcher's conclusion since numerical data is rarely provided. Okay, second is it is highly dependent on the researcher's observation and interpretation, and is very time consuming, and also generalization are almost non-existent since only a single situation of observed, leaving ambiguity in the study. Okay, the researcher has to be highly patient in this particular study because with his data collection and should not look for quick data as the participatory method aim to things to happen on its own rather than making it. Okay, so this is all about the disadvantage of ethnography. Okay, we next go for the next subtopic is about the case study. Okay, about the case study research is a descriptive research that involves describing and interpreting event, condition, circumstance, or situation that are occurring in the present. And also a case study can be conducted to explore to describe or to explain a phenomenon. It could be a synchronic study in which data are collected at a point of time, or it could be longitudinal in the nature. Okay, the general purpose of a case study is to what we talk about the to describe an individual situation case. For example, a person, business, organization, or institution in detail. The case study is to identify the key issue of the case. Your assignment question should tell you what to focus on. Analyze the case using the relevant theoretical concept from your unit and discipline. Recommended a course of action for that particular case, particular for problem solving case study. Okay. Uh, okay. This is about the case study. Uh, and also explanatory case study aim to answer how or why question with little control and behalf of researcher over occurrence of event. This type of case study focus on phenomena within the context of real life situation. Okay, we go for the next slide. This is about the characteristic of case study. Okay, first it is concerned with an exhaustive study of particular instance. It is also emphasize the study of interrelation between different attribute of a unit. Okay, academically, case study depends our perception and give us a clear insight into life. It get at behavior directly and not by an indirect of abstract approach. Each case study needs to have a clear focus, which may include those aspects of the case on which the data collection and analysis will concentrate. Okay, this is about continue about the characteristic of case study, and it focuses the natural history of the unit and the study in and its interaction with the social world around. Okay, the progressive record of personal experience in a case study reveal the internal striving, tension, and motivation that lead to specific behavior and action of individual of unit of analyze. The case study can be a single site study or multi-site study. And last is no generalization is made to a population beyond the cases similar to this study. Okay, this component of case study design. First, they have the study question, and the second, study proposition, if any are being used, or theoretical framework, identification of unit of analysis, the logical linking of the data to the proposition. Okay, the criteria for interpreting the finding. Okay, this is about the component of case study design. Okay, next is type of the case study. Okay, this is about the type of case study design. Okay, they have four type of case study. Okay, the first is uh, the exploratory case study design. Okay, in the exploratory case study design, uh, in this type of case study, the fieldwork and data collection are carried out before determining the research question. It examines a topic on which there is very little prior research, such as study prelude to a large social scientific study. Okay, the second is explanatory case study design. Okay, these are useful for providing explanation to phenomena under consideration. These explanations are pattern implying that one type of variation observed in a case study is systematically related to another variation. Such a pattern can be a relational pattern or causal pattern depending on the conceptual of framework of the study. Okay, the third one is the descriptive case study design. Okay, a descriptive study necessitated that the researcher present a descriptive theory which establish the overall framework for the investigator to follow throughout the study. This type of case study require formulation and identification of practicable theoretical framework before articulating research question. It is also essential to determine the unit of analysis before beginning the research study. In this type of case study, the researcher attempt to portray a phenomenon and conceptualize it, including statement and recreate a situation and context as much as possible. Okay, the last is evaluative case study design. Okay, this about the often in responsive evaluation as this may include a deep account of the phenomena being evaluated and identification of most important and relevant construct, theme, and also pattern. Okay, this is about the type of case study design. Okay, this is the step of conducting a case study. They have 6 steps. First is identifying a current topic which is of interest to researchers, and identifying research question and developing hypothesis if any, and determine the unit of sampling and the number of unit, select the case study, and uh, fourth is identifying source and tool and technique of data collection. This could include interview, observation, documentation, student record, and school database. Collect data in the field. Okay, evaluating and analyzing data. And the last part is the report, writing a report of case study. Okay. Next, we talk about the strengths of case study method. Okay, it involves detailed, holistic investigation of all aspects of the unit under study. Case study data are strong in reality, and also data can be collected over a period of time and is contextual. And case study also report are often written in non-technical language and therefore easily to understood by layperson. Okay, it's able to researcher to assess and document not just the empirical data but also how the subject or institution under study interact with the larger social system. And then lastly, in the strength of case study is about the it can utilize a wide range of measurement tool and the technique. Okay, we focus about the weaknesses of the case study method. First, is about the small sample size prevent the researcher from generalizing to large population, and the case study method has been criticized for use of a small number of cases can offer no ground for establishing reliability and generality of finding. They are often not easy to cross-check, and it's also been criticized as being useful only as an exploratory tool. Okay, the intense exposure to study of the case bias the finding. Okay. Okay, we move for the next last subtopic. This is about the analytical method. Okay, the analytical method, it involves the identification and interpretation of data already existing in document, pictures or artifact. It is a form of research in which event, idea, concept or artifact are examined through the analysis of document, record or recording or other media. Okay, and analytical technique or analytical method is procedure or method for the analysis of some problem, status, or fact. Analytical techniques are usually time limited and task limited. They are used once to solve a specific issue. Okay, to solve specific issue, opposed to management method that affect management or of the organization in the longer term. Okay, this is about the analytical method. Okay, we move to the next slide is about the characteristic of analytical research. Okay, the first is it does not create or generate data through the research tool and technique. And the topic of analytical research deal with the past. It reinterprets existing data. Okay, it's very important about the analytical research. It's not create a new data. It is reinterpret existing data. Okay, it is use document, relic, and oral testimonies for collecting data, and the internal and external criticism is used as a technique while searching for facts and providing interpretive explanation. The last is it predominantly use a primary source for collecting data. Okay, we talk about the objective of analytical research. Okay, first is it reinterpret the past for each age group. It is use and logic to analyze the past and demythologize idealized conception of the past, and it generates a sense of universal justification and underlying principle and aim of education in society. It enables the researcher to shed light on existing policy by interpreting the past. And last is it offer understanding of the past existing or available data. Okay, this is about the objective analytical research. Okay, this last part is from my group presentation. Okay, the conclusion. Okay, although there are weaknesses every type of research, but this method is very necessary and important to be implemented because the finding of the study and are very helpful and provide information needed by certain parties and organizations for them to implement policy or plan in the future. Okay, so that's all from my part in this presentation, and I would like to thank you for all of you for give a time to focus for my presentation. Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.